Hi there. Can you guys hear me in the back? Pretty well. And back there, can you hear me? Hi everyone, I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, the director of this museum. So happy to have you all here. Thank you so much. Thank you to the people who keep our air conditioning running. Thank you to these artists. I hope you've had a chance, in addition to enjoying each other's company, to check out some of the art that's on view. And that you'll come back when you can spend a little more calm, meditative time with the art as well. It's when the organizers of this event asked about the possibility of having it at the museum, they must have known that if they mention Anne Braden, I'm definitely gonna say yes. Speaking for myself, so grateful for the work that GunSense Vermont does. Thank you to all of you who are part of GunSense Vermont and who support GunSense Vermont. So in that sense, really proud to have this event here, but also honestly, Anne is just a personal hero of mine. She's probably turning red right now. I'm not looking at her, but I think she knows that already. And I realized that this is actually the third time that we've honored Anne Braden here at the Brattleboro Museum. In the 5 years ago this week was the launch of Anne's first book, The Benefits of Being an Octopus, and we had a fabulous book launch here. And then a couple years ago, Anne was kind enough to be the keynote speaker for the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards award ceremony here. So I'm not sure there's anybody else who's been honored in the Brattleboro Museum 3 times in their life, let alone the last 5 years. So Anne's definitely deserving. I hope you're all enjoying yourselves and that you'll continue to do so. I'm really happy you're here, happy to be part of this, and I'm going to turn things over now to the Executive Director of GunSense Vermont, Connor Casey.
Thanks so much, brother. All right, everybody, welcome to the inaugural Leadership and Courage Awards for GunSense here. And I don't know, Anne is so great, we actually might honor her a 4th time next summer if we keep it up here. But just really want to thank everybody for coming out. And I feel like we won the Megabucks lottery getting the Brattleboro Museum to be the host here. I've never been in my life, but it's a beautiful place. And it's so special, and just doing all the work they do for the community, they really do deserve a round of applause. So thanks so much, Danny. GunSense is largely a volunteer-driven organization. So I'm a part-time staffer myself, but GunSense doesn't operate without our great volunteers, and tonight is no exception. So I'd like everybody who was on the host committee to maybe raise their hand here. In addition to Danny, we got Lynn Barrett, Alyssa Pine, Stephanie Bonin, Pat Howell, Bob Williamson, and Mel Martin. If everybody just raises their hand. What a bunch. And I'd like to thank our sponsors too. We had a lot of people step up here to sponsor the award ceremony. I'm actually going to thank them at the end. We have a few elected officials in the room. And unfortunately we didn't let elected officials speak today. So it says a lot about them that they would show up without, they say the most dangerous place in the world is between a politician and a microphone, right? So it shows how dedicated to the cause they are. So I really want to acknowledge them. First we have Mike Pieciak. Where's Mike here? Mike is our state treasurer. He's been supporting us for a long time before he came treasurer. And I've just noticed Mike's work firsthand the last few weeks. I represent Montpelier. Mike's been in the trenches with us, slinging stuff out of cellars with the flood. So can't thank him enough. And it's a Brattleboro hometown boy. So welcome home, Mike. We have the mayor of Burlington, Vermont has come down. It's got to be 7 hours, right? It's got to be 7 hours from Burlington. Nobody on the municipal level has done more to combat gun violence than Miro Weinberger. He goes way back with Braden. He was one of the first mayors to sign onto the pledge against illegal guns back in the day. And if you see anybody, he's in the State House committees. Almost every day of the session, you see him there testifying with us, doing the best he can for his city, which, we've seen a spike across the state here. But, we need to give municipal officials, like mayors, more at the municipal level that they can do to combat gun violence. So that's why we do need to repeal the Sportsman's Bill of Rights and let Burlington pass the charters that they got through there. We absolutely do. Couple of phenomenal state senators, and being in the House, I don't always say that, but I really want to introduce, when I first got the job with GunSense, Ruth Hardy was one of my first phone calls there, asking what she could do to get some of our priorities over the finish line, and I really appreciate that. Nader Hashim, where's he? All right, Windham County Senator. His voice is so important coming from law enforcement in this debate, and he started in the House and he's finishing it in the Senate there. So these senators really helped us get some of these priorities over the finish line this year. Let's not forget our House reps. And you really want to be good to Emily Kornheiser because she's Chair of Ways and Means. And Emily's been this a long time. Sarah Coffey, where's the Chair of Transportation? I just got back from, we took a trip to Ireland, Sarah, me, a few others, and she's still standing. She didn't stagger at all on the way in. Molly Burke, she was with us in Ireland as well. Molly sits next to me on the House floor and tells me how to vote. Tristan Roberts, where's Tristan? All right, Tristan is on my committee. He's a fierce advocate. It's lovely to have him in the House today. And Michelle Boss-Lunn. Where's Michelle? All right. Michelle gave me a panic attack. She said, I can't come to the event tonight. I'm with Congresswoman Balint at another event. I said, but the Congresswoman's coming to our event. She thought I meant up in Montpelier, so thank God, okay. A few other people to thank. We have some young folks in the House here. GunSense is nothing without our youth chapter, and it really is the young people who are driving the debate on this. Our GunSense youth chapter really has had a key role in forming our legislative agenda and getting up in the State House and really knocking some heads around and getting this done. So we have some younger people in the House today. First, two photographers from Insight Photography, Genevieve and Thaddeus. They're with Emily Wagner and Rachel, who's their teacher there, so we'll give them a round of applause. And then in the back, I think you could ask them today, like they've had some harrowing stories about school drills already. So if you get a chance, go talk to them at the table there. We have Maisie Arnold and Isabella May. Okay, could you imagine if we let everybody speak? Be here till dawn, right? I'm going to get off the stage now, but we're going to say quite a bit about Anne today. I'm pretty tall, but I feel like I'm the one standing on the shoulders of a giant with Anne Braden. Seriously, the first time I met her, I said, this person is different. This is somebody who shows up, and like the Oscar Wilde quote came to mind that, every day we read the news and we see so much tragedy and suffering. And Oscar Wilde said, we're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And when Anne founded GunSense, it was, a small voice that grew exponentially to the point where, if I look at an email list, we're 4,000 strong right now. And it wouldn't have been done without Anne. It wouldn't have been done without Anne. It's a real rare person who, has conversations with folks, and I notice this with Anne, and it's easy to vilify people who think differently than us, but it's a lot harder to convince them to change their minds, and that's what Anne did in so many cases. I'll never forget, I was actually working with the Democratic Party there, and I stood on the State House lawn, and I saw people with tears in their eyes as Governor Scott signed through the landmark legislation of raising the age to purchase a gun, limiting high-capacity magazines. Our Republican governor did this, and it wouldn't have been without that grassroots pressure there. Another big thanks, before I turn it over to our next speaker, to the Necrassen Group. There are 4 of them today who are lobbyists. That's a harsh word, right? We'll call them government affairs professionals who are here working on so much of that legislation. And I'd like to thank our lobbyist, Maggie Lenz, who did so much good work this year, too. We'll talk about it at the end. So our first main speaker, we were talking about the youth chapter. Grace Walter was with the youth of GunSense there, very inspired by Anne Braden and the work they were doing. Something about Grace, she grew up down the street from Sandy Hook School in Newtown, Connecticut. So, when you think of trauma as a result of gun violence, certainly individuals, certainly their family members and acquaintances, but there's a such thing as community trauma. And the trauma that Newtown, Connecticut went through is just unimaginable. And Grace experienced that. Grace has been a great leader working with other GunSense youth there. And unfortunately, she aged out of that, so we had to throw her on our board of trustees. But so I'd love to invite Grace up to just say a few words. Thanks so much, Grace.
I am so honored and grateful to be here. The grief that enveloped my community of Newtown in the aftermath of Sandy Hook was nothing short of heart-wrenching and profound. The loss of 20 innocent children and 6 educators shattered not only our sense of security, but our hearts. My tight-knit community grappled with an unimaginable pain that transcended words. As the nation mourned alongside us, Newtown's grief became a symbol of the collective anguish we all felt in the face of such violence. A stark reminder of the urgent need for change, unity, and a commitment to prevent further tragedies. In the wake of Sandy Hook, Anne Braden, a Vermont resident, felt the same anguish that so many of us did. But Anne refused to let her grief paralyze her. Instead, she turned to her sorrow into action. I commend Anne for founding GunSense Vermont, an organization very dear to my heart. She recognized that while the tragedy of Sandy Hook was a horrifying event, it was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of gun violence that claims lives every single day across our nation. Vermont, like many states, has a strong gun culture, and the issue of gun violence was a divisive and deeply entrenched one, but Anne was undeterred. She knew that change would require courage, persistence, and a commitment to the well-being of her community and nation as a whole. Under Anne's leadership, GunSense Vermont advocated for evidence-based gun safety measures such as universal background checks and the prevention of domestic abusers from obtaining firearms. Through her tireless efforts, the organization gained widespread support and made significant strides in promoting responsible gun ownership. In the 2023 legislative session, Vermont achieved a significant milestone in the realm of gun violence. Several critical gun safety bills were successfully passed into law. This is the legacy that Anne has forged, one that will continue to endure and evolve in the years to come. Anne Braden's dedication and resilience serve as an inspiration to all of us. She showed us that in the face of tragedy and adversity, one person can make a profound difference. In honoring Anne Braden and the work of GunSense Vermont, let us remember that change is possible when we unite around a shared vision of safety and responsibility. Let us continue to work together to prevent the devastating toll of gun violence on our communities and our nation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Grace. Yeah. Could you imagine the job of introducing Becca Balint in Brattleboro? We said there's a no politicians rule, but Congresswoman Balint is so much more than a politician. she's been an activist on this issue before she was even elected. And I think, you know, as I described that scene on the State House lawn, you know, courage is the word we use, you know, when we talk about those who do this work. And, you know, in her first term as pro tem of the Senate, nobody was more courageous than Becca was. She brought this fight to the State House when it was an unpopular fight. It's not so, it was a third rail in Vermont politics. Nobody touched it until then. And all of a sudden, people started talking about it. You know, people started like showing up, changing their minds on this. And you know, I'm just so proud that we have a congresswoman who did this work on the ground floor and pushed this stuff over the finish line, carrying some people with her, you know, in that building. It's tough to get anything done in that building, but she did it with such grace and also convinced so many people that this was the right thing to do, including Governor Scott. So she deserves all the credit in the world for the landmark legislation we passed in 2018. And I am so proud to have her move from the State House to be the first woman in Congress representing the state of Vermont, where she's fighting for us every day. So thanks so much. We'll turn it over to Becca.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you. Hello, Brattleboro. Thank you, Connor. Where'd Grace go? Nice job, really nice job. Yeah. It's really, really nice to be back in my hometown and in my neighborhood. I live just right up the hill. And it is, I wish you could stand here with me and just look out at all of the amazing people in this room, so many friends and former colleagues and neighbors who have worked on this issue for many, many years. And when I was asked if I would be willing to give this speech in honor of Anne, of course I said yes. You know, I get offered condolences a lot when I come home to Vermont, condolences for serving in that toxic environment. And I do, I get offered condolences. A lot of people ask me if I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right, I'm doing great. And people offer me luck, which I always take, and spiritual protection, which I also take. But one thing I want you to know is I am certainly working with some people in Congress who have lost their way. That is true. But I also work with amazing people, people who inspire me every single day. And for that, I feel lucky a lot of the time. And tonight, I actually feel like one of the luckiest gals in Vermont because I get to stand up here and talk to you about Anne Braden, a courageous leader, a friend, and I could not be more proud and honored to be sharing the stage with you. You know, we've known each other for a long time, and for a while there, Anne and I were leading parallel lives. We were middle school teachers, which should tell you a lot about what we find funny. It's nothing like middle school humor, nothing like it. We were social studies teachers. We were both writers. Anne wrote novels, still does, very successfully. I wrote op-ed. We each had 2 kids. Our kids went to elementary school together. We are both very joyful people, and we want to make a positive difference in the world. And we are both small but mighty. And we have both had the honor of being called horrible names by Vermonters who did not agree with our policy choices. But we were also both permanently and deeply impacted by the horrific massacre of children and teachers at Sandy Hook in Newtown. I wrote op-ed for about 10 years in the Brattleboro Reformer. The hardest column I ever wrote was the one after Sandy Hook. I wept while I was writing it. I wept while I was editing it. I wept for the children, for their families, for the educators, for their spouses, for that town, and honestly, for all of us, for mankind. And I really struggled with how to put into words what I was feeling. And I realized while I was in the process of doing that, that I couldn't capture the emotion properly in prose. And I'm not a poet. But it was the kind of event that required something else of me. And I did my level best to honor those people dealing with that horrible tragedy. But I know, despite my best efforts, I fell short. I didn't know what to write. Because when something is unthinkable, you cannot make it intelligible. While I wrestled with words on one side of town, Anne was on the other side of town, also wrestling with words. And she wrote and delivered a beautiful sermon at the UU Church in Brattleboro about Sandy Hook. And I saw her trying to do the same thing I was trying to do, which was putting into words emotions that were so excruciating, so enormous, they couldn't really be contained. And then she called on us with all of her full heart and her deep belief in possibility, exhorted us to take action. That we couldn't sit in our grief. And you touched on this as well. You can't sit in your grief. For Anne, being heartsick wasn't enough. And so that, how I see it, was really the birth of GunSense. And she knew that outrage was not going to save lives. It needed to be channeled into action. She knew that we weren't going to get to a better place as a society or our culture simply by pointing out the atrocity. What she needed to do was get other people involved in the cause. And so how amazing for us to be standing here when it was an idea in your head, and now thousands and thousands of Vermonters are part of this organization that you birthed. It is the power of possibility. It is the power of community. And I remember having a conversation early on with Anne about her budding organization. And I think you asked me, Anne, like, well, what do I do now? And I said, Anne, you need money. You need money. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the very first donation to GunSense Vermont. I wrote the check right there, and I said, you need money to make this a reality. And then she was off and running. And so many of the people in this room have been part of that. And yes, the Necrassen group has been incredible. And legislators across this room and volunteers, you have made this happen. And so I believe deeply in the work that would become GunSense, and I still do. And I gotta tell you, I believed in it because of the cause, absolutely, as a former teacher, but I believed in it, Anne, and I believe it would come into fruition because of you, honestly. And I still do, so deeply. Anne literally did the work of changing the landscape, and Connor talked about this, and I know Miro has been a huge champion as well of reducing gun violence in Burlington, that we needed something to focus around, and Anne made that possible. And so many of us in here, and I will leave someone out if I start calling out legislators, because so many of us did work on this. So much success. And Connor mentioned prohibiting high capacity magazines, raising the minimum wage, requiring background checks, passing extreme risk laws, making sure that we were doing, in this most recent legislative session, secure stores. So much good work is continuing to happen. And it started with believing that something could change. And when I first came in the Vermont Senate, we were told, third rail, can't touch it. Could not touch it, that it would be the death of you as a politician, that it wouldn't get over the finish line. And I also have to give credit also to a former colleague of mine who's the current pro tem, Phil Baruth, was also someone and continues to be a champion on this issue, that for many, many years we were told it couldn't happen, but it took Anne and all the people that you brought with you to believe that we could make that change, and we did. And obviously, there's still more to do. And I just need to take this opportunity to say that the thing that still pains me so deeply is our incredibly high rate of suicide by firearms. So much work we still need to do here, and I know many of you are with me in common cause. And I'm not going to talk about my work in Congress because I'm there with you. I'm with you on this fight, and I have incredible colleagues in the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. So many of us focused on this. And I got to tell you, nothing is going to happen. This is the only political thing I'm going to say, Connor. Nothing is going to happen until we get 4 more people in the House of Representatives that believe that we can make change on this issue. That is the reality, and that's one of the things I'm working on. So we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to Anne for her vision, for her hard work, for her commitment, and yes, for her courage and leadership, which I think is just like the perfect name for this award. And it all started with Anne saying enough, and with her getting us to believe that it was enough, something had to change. So Anne and I pulled up in the parking lot at the exact same moment. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and we hopped out of our cars and gave each other these big, big hugs. And I said to her what I'm now going to say to you. I get so much inspiration from this woman. And I most recently learned about a concept that I want to share with you, and that is the concept of moral beauty. People who show the world moral beauty. And it comes from research on awe and what brings people awe. And a lot of people think we get the most of our sense of awe from the natural world or from spirituality, from music. But honestly, what the research is showing is that we get the most experience of awe when people show us moral beauty through kindness, through strength, through overcoming adversity, pushing through hardships, showing us that we're actually capable of more, that we can push the limits of what is possible for us. And Anne, you embody moral beauty. So I know many of you here in Brattleboro have heard me say it before. A lot of Vermonters have heard me say it, and I believe it to be true. This is absolutely a time for courage. It truly is. We all need to dig deep. We need to find and nurture our bravery and our grit and our guts, and we cannot turn away and ask other people to do this work. We have to do the work. And I'm always going through in my mind the words of June Jordan, the poet. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones. Now, I know Anne, we've known each other for years, and I know right now she's feeling really embarrassed. It's kind of excruciating because she knows that the work of GunSense is really because of all the people in this room and all of the volunteers across the state, and that is absolutely true. And many of the folks in the room tonight have done that work. And I see you, Ann sees you, and we're so grateful for the collective action. That is true. But Ann, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Ann. We need leaders like you that call upon ourselves to be our best selves. We need it. We're craving it. We're desperate for it. That ask us to reach beyond what we think is possible for ourselves and for our community. That push us to ask tough questions of ourselves and our nation. And Ann, you are one of those leaders. You are one of those leaders. And you wrote something in your award-winning book, The Benefits of Being an Octopus, that I come to when I am doing my work. And it's this: since life isn't fair, it's up to us to balance it out. You are clever, you are funny, you are fearless, you are fierce at times and stubborn. You're a great writer, you're an inspiring leader, and you've shown us how to do the critical work of balancing out the world. And Vermont is a better place for the work that you have done, and I am a better person for having you as a friend and a confidant. Thank you, Aunt Braden.
That's our Congresswoman, folks. You know, like, so much of the work we do, like, revolves around, like, tragedy and suffering, and it's really tough sometimes, you know? It's tough to get up in the morning and do this work every day. But, you know, it's important for us to come together a night like this and celebrate, you know? And celebrate. Take a night off, you know? Recharge the battery, celebrate the victories we have had, and celebrate the people who made those victories possible. So we'd like to turn it over to the award ceremony now, and I'd ask Bob Williamson, one of the original board members of GunSense Vermont, to come up to help me a bit with this. Bob is a mentor of mine. He took me under his wing when I came on board with GunSense, and you know, he teaches me something every day. And nobody feels these issues like Bob feels it. He's like a Jack Russell Terrier lobbyist. You know, if you see somebody like Sarducci's and like Montpelier or something, he's going up. He's asking them to pass the bill. So you never get a better one than Bob here. But you know, Bob goes way back with Ann, and I'd like to turn it over to him to hand over the award, and then we'd like to do a bit of a photo with Becca, Bob, and Ann there.
Thanks so much, Connor. You're too humble. Everything's already been said, but not by everybody. When Ann Braden showed up that day in Montpelier 10.5 years ago with 5,000 signatures on petitions, you knew she meant business. She had 2 copies of each of them, and they were the size of New York City phone directories. One was for Speaker Shap Smith, and one was for Governor Shumlin. We had a press conference, and afterwards Ann said, we got to meet up. Let's go into the cafeteria. We all sat around a big table. I'm sure Ann remembers that. She said, we got to stick together. We got to stay in this. She was our quarterback, calling the plays. She's great. You've heard it. And she made you a believer that we could get this done. We could do this. That's why we're here tonight. Ann, please come forward. And you bowled us over with your sincerity and focus when you created GunSense Vermont. we're honored to present this to you for your vision and hard work that continues to transform Vermont's political landscape around gun reform. Our children, our families, our communities are safer because of your courageous efforts, which also paved the way for our first Congresswoman, Becca Balint, your dear friend and neighbor. Bowls are vessels for holding important contents. May this bowl of Vermont maple be a symbol of the care with which you crafted GunSense Vermont. And we're so grateful for you leading the way forward. Thank you so much. And because you have two hands, we have this award too. Another award, Leadership and Courage Award, presented to Ann Braden, founder of GunSense Vermont, in recognition of your dedication to saving innocent lives, from the Board of Directors. Thank you so much.
Hi. Thank you. And I felt like I was going to be prepared to speak until I listened and had all my emotions come up, and whether or not I can actually say all this without crying will be a testament to something. I'm not sure what. But I am so honored by all of your presence tonight. Those of you who do not even live in Windham County, I know how long it takes to get to Windham County from somewhere else in the state. Thank you. And I don't think I quite have words to respond currently to what I just heard, but I am humbled to be among people who put such beauty into the world. The thing is, I know I was at the center of it at the beginning, like kind of like this unrelenting engine that kept going. But when I think back about those memories, all of them have to do with other people. And one of my very first, I had forgotten that I gave a sermon, but my first memory was Becca sitting me down and saying, "You need to ask for money." And I was like, what would I do with money? And then she gave me a check, which was our very first donation. And I remember standing at the post office in front of Bellows Falls with Lindahl Bowl, getting verbally accosted by a very angry man, and we were two very nice little ladies. But, we just kept, collecting those petition signatures. And I remember the unwavering dedication of the board that continues on to this day. And there are board members that I have not met before, and that is astounding to me and fabulous. And I am so grateful for your work, because I know it takes work. And I think of all my times with Alyssa Pine, and I can't talk about that too much or else I really will stop crying and won't be able to keep talking, but she was my emotional rock during times when I really needed an emotional rock. And then there's the Necrason group, who were like the older siblings I never had and always needed. They were like wise and protective of me and simultaneously encouraging and empowering as all get out. And they also let me sleep on their couch when I had to stay up in Montpelier and use their Netflix account. That's a good older sibling. And when I was utterly burnt out, and so much so that my digestive system had stopped working entirely, there were people who picked up the baton and carried it. And to see the organization and what it has become today, and all these new wonderful faces, and to see Connor Casey's fabulously competent leadership, it is surreal. One of the things I've learned is that we all have to find our own way to move this world in the right direction. And for it to be sustainable, it has to be something that feeds us too. And I think about that every time I look at our Congresswoman, because she is doing what she was made to do. And our world is infinitely better because of it. however, am an introvert. And as much as I love you all, work that requires constantly interacting with other people, for me, is work that is constantly draining. And of course, add on some unrelentless bullying just as the icing on the top. But it was also work that pushed me forward as a person. And once you find out what you're capable of, you don't often forget it. Also, so Becca and I both started out as middle school social studies teachers, teaching kids to make their voices heard, teaching critical thinking. And then a few years before I started GunSense, I started writing novels for middle grade students. And my goal was to get published. I was writing one manuscript a year. And during my most intense years at GunSense, there is a clear shift in those manuscripts. Because I had figured out that I had the courage to say the hard things, that I was strong enough to put the real, honest truth right there on the page for everyone to see, even if not everyone was going to like it, even if it was going to make some people very angry. I knew that I could do it. Also, I learned from Adam Nekrasen that you don't get people to look at things in a new way with statistics. You do it with stories. And so now, my audience, instead of legislators, is kids and adults all over the country. And let me tell you, it is incredible to be in the basement of a library in rural Kansas with 80 people of all ages who have all read your book, getting to have a calm discussion about the common ground on gun laws. For too long, our country has been out of balance, with an extremist wing using guns to further inflate the outsized power of a few. And they claim their focus is on guns, but really, it's about pushing back as people of color and women try to make their rightful place at the table known, all while making, the gun industry a whole lot more money. I am so grateful for everyone in this room and all we have already accomplished. And I'm so grateful that tonight, all the money here is going to support an organization working to make our state both a safer place and a reminder that it's possible to be a gun-owning state where laws are based not on what bullies want, but based on what the vast majority of people want. We don't have to fear this issue. And thanks to you here in Vermont, it is now possible to calmly pass the gun laws we need. Thank you.
Well, let's get some pictures of you guys. You might have to squeeze a wee bit. Oh, that's lovely. Okay. Ah, great. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. All right, folks. That is going to conclude our speaking order. I just want to say how appropriate I think it is that GunSense Vermont began in Brattleboro, and we're giving our inaugural award here in Brattleboro. We have a ton of work to do, and everybody has their role to play when we leave this room, because GunSense isn't just a logo, it's not just an organization, it's every one of us. And as long as 80 of our family members, friends, and neighbors are being killed by gun violence in Vermont every year, we still have work to do, and we're going to do it, and we're going to get it done. I'm just going to leave thanking our sponsors and encouraging everybody. We're launching our Sustainable Member campaign, which if anybody could throw in $5 a month, it just means the world to us to be like organizing, educating, rather than fundraising all the time. So that's going to be out soon with an email, and we'd love your support on that. Our sponsors tonight, we couldn't do it without them. The Tier 3 Berkeley and Veller Greenwood Country Realtors. Well, there's quite a few. You might want to save it till the end, guys. It's Brattleboro Savings and Loan, the Richards Group, Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman, who's been a great advocate on these issues. He couldn't be here tonight. Tier 2, AFT Vermont, the American Federation of Teachers, the Brattleboro Reformer, who I think might be in the room, Chroma Technology, and NEA, the National Education Association. The Tier 1 sponsors, Bob Williamson, you heard from the man himself. Mike Pieciak in the room, our treasurer. You can applaud for him, he's in the room, you know. Corpus Christi Memorial Fund and the Vermont Community Foundation. Of course, the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. Thanks again, Danny, for hosting us today. And the Ben and Jerry's Foundation. So thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy yourselves. A lot of work to do. Go in.
Hello, I'm Mayor Miro Weinberger from Burlington, but I'm happy to be here in Brattleboro tonight for this really remarkable event honoring the work of Braden here at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. It was really a beautiful evening, noting just how much and GunSense has done to change this state over really a very short period of time. I remember well Newtown. I had just been in office for less than a year in Burlington when the incredible tragedy happened in Newtown, and was able to talk to a number of other Vermont mayors and to come out and take a stand for action on common sense gun reforms. We signed up to be a group of Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It would have been much harder to do that if Braden had also started GunSense Vermont at about the same time. So it's really quite something to be here today, a little more than a decade later, knowing just how much has changed in this state since the movement she started back in 2012, 2013.
This is Representative Molly Burke of Brattleboro, and I'm here at the Brattleboro Museum for this wonderful event honoring Anne Braden, founder of GunSense Vermont. It's been a great night here with speeches by our Congresswoman Becca Balint and hearing about the importance of the work that Anne Braden did to begin found the GunSense organization, which has been very successful in passing legislation in Vermont. Congresswoman Becca Balint talked about the difficulty of when she first came to the legislature, how people said, no, gun legislation is the third rail of Vermont politics, you can't touch it. And through Anne's persistence in getting signatures and getting people involved, we have been able to pass significant gun legislation in Vermont. It's very difficult to be living in this country and to hear, every week, every month, whatever, school shootings, shootings in religious communities. It's just, we need to pass assault weapons bans and continue this work to make sure that we have a sane and safe world, we have a sane and safe country, and people don't have to worry. I was listening to something on the radio the other day, and people said that why they homeschool their kids, and the reason why they want to homeschool their kids is they're afraid their kids are going to get shot at school. What a terrible commentary on our country.